Are you getting up 3 or 4 times a night? Does your stream feel weaker than it used to, and have you caught yourself scanning a room for the nearest bathroom before you've even sat down? I lived with all of that for almost a decade before I understood why. That particular kind of tired isn't sleepy tired, it's worn down tired, the kind that sits behind your eyes the next morning while you're trying to have a normal conversation over coffee. A large share of men past the age of 50 carry some form of an enlarged prostate, and for most of us, nobody sits us down and explains what's actually happening inside that gland. We're just told it's common, handed a pamphlet, and sent on our way. I'm Ernest. I'm 83 years old, and these days I sleep through most nights without interruption, and when I do wake up, it's once, not 4 times. I still keep every one of my regular checkups. I've never once skipped one. But I no longer walk into that appointment room carrying the same dread I used to carry, because I finally understand what's been happening to my body, and I've done something real about it. I drove 6 hours straight to visit my sister last month, one stop for gas, and didn't think twice about it. I'm not telling you that to impress anybody. 10 years ago, that same drive would have meant planning every rest stop in advance. Let me take you back to where I started, because the half-cup habit I'm going to tell you about only makes sense once you understand the mechanism underneath it. For years, I assumed the swelling and the constant bathroom trips were simply what happens when a man's body wears out. That's the story most of us are handed, and it's a convenient story because it doesn't ask anyone to look closer. But wearing out isn't a mechanism, it's a shrug, and I got tired of shrugging. What I eventually learned, piece by piece, mostly from a retired urologist who used to fish with my late brother-in-law, is that the prostate is a gland surrounded by muscle tissue, and that tissue responds to specific signals in the body, hormonal signals, inflammatory signals, and structural ones tied to how the cells in that tissue are built and maintained. When those signals run unchecked for years, the gland keeps growing, and the muscle around it stays tight and irritated, which is exactly the pressure and urgency so many of us live with and never get a straight answer about. Here's the part that reframed everything for me. There's a structural building block in that tissue, the cell membranes that make up the gland and the smooth muscle around the urethra, and what those membranes are built from matters. For decades, researchers have studied a plant compound called beta-sitosterol, which is structurally similar to cholesterol and appears to compete with it in ways that support healthier tissue structure and better urinary flow. It's not a hormone, it's not a drug, it's a plant compound your body can actually use, the same category of compound found in seeds, nuts, and certain oils that our grandparents ate far more of than we do now. That distinction mattered enormously to me because I was terrified of the medications my doctor had mentioned as the next step if things got worse. The ones with the reputation for stealing a man's energy, his drive, the parts of himself he spent a lifetime being proud of. I wasn't ready to trade one problem for another. I wanted something that worked with my body instead of overriding it. For years, one number ran my life, the PSA. It would tick up a point and I'd lie awake the whole night certain it meant the worst, picturing the biopsy, the knife, the end of everything. Then someone finally told me the truth no doctor had. That number doesn't measure cancer, it measures your prostate. And as we age, it climbs mostly because the gland is simply enlarging, benign, swollen, and uncomfortable, not the worst. The number was scaring me half to death over something ordinary. And the prescriptions they push to shrink it? They can flatten your drive completely, soften everything, quietly take the man right out of you. I wasn't willing to trade that away. There's a gentle way to support that gland, keep it comfortable, a healthy size, without surrendering any of that. Keep getting checked every year, of course. At 83, that number doesn't own me anymore. I finally have peace. Let me show you what gave it to me in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. So I asked the retired urologist directly, if beta-sitosterol is the compound, where does a man actually get it without buying some overpriced bottle off a shelf he can't pronounce? His answer surprised me with how simple it was. Pumpkin seeds. Plain, roasted, shelled pumpkin seeds, about half a cup a day, worked into my routine the way another man might work in a handful of almonds. A landmark study published decades ago and referenced in medical literature since found that men taking beta-sitosterol showed measurable improvement in urinary symptom scores compared to those on a placebo. Better flow, less residual sense of not fully emptying, more comfortable nights. A follow-up trial extended those findings over a longer period and found the improvement held up. That's not a fringe claim. That's a compound with real research behind it, sitting quietly in a food most of us walked past in the grocery store our whole lives without a second thought. I'll be honest with you, because that's the only way I know how to talk about this. Pumpkin seeds alone are not some miracle switch. The research on pumpkin seed as a whole food, separate from concentrated beta-sitosterol, is more mixed. One of the larger trials on pumpkin seed extract specifically didn't show a clear difference from placebo on its main outcome. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you a handful of seeds cured me, because that would be a lie, and this channel doesn't traffic in lies. What I will tell you is that half a cup a day, worked into a broader habit of eating the way my body actually needed, made a real and lasting difference for me over several months. The seeds were one piece of a bigger picture, not a magic bullet standing alone. I think that honesty matters more than most people realize, because this space is full of videos promising a single food that fixes everything, and men my age have been burned by that kind of promise more than once. I'd rather tell you the truth and have it take 3 months to work than tell you a fairy tale and watch you give up in a week when the fairy tale doesn't deliver. The men I've talked with who actually got lasting relief, not just a good week here and there, but a real, sustained change, almost never got there from one single food. They got there from understanding the mechanism and then building a handful of small, boring habits around it, the same way I eventually did. Let me also tell you what almost stopped me before I started. I read the label on a bottle of concentrated beta-sitosterol supplement at the pharmacy, and the price nearly sent me back out the door. That's when the retired urologist stopped me and said something I still think about. Ernest, you don't need the bottle. You need the plant. The bottle just charges you for convenience. That's when he walked me through the seeds instead, and it's part of why I trust food-based habits over flashy supplements now, not because supplements are worthless, but because the food version, done consistently, gets you most of the way there for a fraction of the cost, and it fits into an actual life instead of a pill organizer. That bigger picture is what I actually want to walk you through, because a single habit rarely does the whole job. First, the pumpkin seeds themselves, half a cup, most days, plain or lightly salted, worked into a salad or eaten straight from a small bowl I keep on the counter. Second, I paid attention to zinc, which sits at a naturally high concentration in healthy prostate tissue. Pumpkin seeds happen to be rich in it too, along with cashews and a few other everyday foods, and getting enough of it through food rather than a megadose supplement seemed to support the same comfort I was chasing. Third, I cut back on the ultra-processed food that had crept into my diet over the years, the fried, the fast, the heavily packaged. Research linking metabolic strain and chronic inflammation to prostate size and worse urinary symptoms is some of the most consistent evidence in this entire field, and cutting that load felt like closing a door that had been feeding the problem for years without my knowledge. Fourth, and this one surprised me the most, I paid closer attention to how much water I drank and when I drank it. Not less water overall, I made sure I was well hydrated during the day, but I stopped drinking anything heavy in the 2 or 3 hours before bed. That single shift alone cut one of my nighttime trips almost immediately, even before the other changes had time to build. It's a small, almost embarrassingly obvious adjustment, and I'm a little annoyed nobody suggested it to me sooner. I want to spend a moment on why these 4 pieces work better together than any one of them does alone, because I think that's the part most men skip past. The seeds and the zinc support the structural and hormonal side of the tissue. Cutting processed food reduces the inflammatory fuel that keeps the gland irritated, and managing when I drink water addresses the mechanical symptom directly, independent of whatever's happening at the tissue level. 3 different angles on the same problem working at the same time rather than one lonely habit trying to carry the whole load by itself. That's the system. And it's the reason it held up for me long after the first few weeks of enthusiasm wore off. I remember the first time I made it through an entire church service without once calculating how far the nearest restroom was. I sat there afterward almost stunned at how ordinary the whole morning had felt. These days I take my grandson fishing for hours at a time. No plan, no map of bathrooms along the riverbank, Just the two of us, and however long the fish are biting. That freedom is worth more to me now than almost anything else I could name at 83. I also want to mention what didn't work, because I think it's just as useful as what did. I tried a saw palmetto supplement for a few months on the recommendation of a friend, and honestly, I didn't notice much of anything. That lines up with what I later learned, one of the largest trials ever run on saw palmetto, testing it at multiple doses against a placebo, found no meaningful benefit over placebo at any dose. I'm telling you that not to knock every supplement on the shelf, but because I think it's important for you to hear a man my age say plainly, I tried something popular, it didn't do much for me, and I moved on to what the research actually supported instead of sticking with it out of stubbornness. There's no shame in trying something and setting it aside when it doesn't deliver. I want to be clear about something because I take this part seriously. An enlarged prostate is not cancer, and supporting a healthy size and comfortable function doesn't mean you get to walk away from your regular screening. The fear that any change down there means the worst is common, and it's usually wrong, but usually wrong is not the same as never check. I'm not telling you to skip anything. I'm telling you to keep every appointment, every year, and let your doctor watch what he's trained to watch, while you support your own comfort the way I've described. Here's what I settled on, a few drops a day. And let me tell you why it works. One compound calms one signal, but a swollen prostate answers when several are calmed at once. The growth signal, the inflammation, the pressure inside it. So what I use concentrates them, working as one, the way the research actually uses them, not a single ingredient pretending to be enough. A gland that stays comfortable and a healthy size, fewer trips, and the quiet of no longer fearing that number. It leaves the man fully intact, none of that flattening the prescriptions can do. It's linked right under this video, go look for yourself. It won't replace your doctor or your yearly check. It supports the biology right alongside them. I'm 83, and that number doesn't own me anymore. What I want you to walk away with is this. The size and comfort of that gland isn't purely a matter of luck or age. There's a real structural mechanism behind it, and there are real food-based ways to support it, sitting in the produce aisle rather than behind a prescription counter. I think often about the man I was a decade ago, exhausted, embarrassed, mapping every outing around a bathroom he might need. And I think about the man I am now, the one who takes his grandson fishing without a second thought. Nobody handed me that back. I had to understand the mechanism first, and then do something small and consistent about it, day after day, month after month. That's not a miracle. That's just paying attention to what your body has been trying to tell you all along. If any part of this sounds like your life, tell me in the comments how long you've carried it, what your doctor has told you, what you've tried. I read every single comment myself, and I answer what I can. And if today's video gave you a clearer picture of your own body, subscribe, because there's more of what I've learned still coming.